about this extraordinary ability, inner ability that each one of us, we all have it. It's an ability to use the mind to create the life that we desire to experience. And I know from the many conversations that I've had with you, many of you, several of you, that you have been using your power to shape and to reshape, to create your life as you so desire it. We were reminded last week that Unity, this church, is really a teaching ministry. We teach the principles for better living. The late Dr. Robert Schuller used to teach principles. He called it possibility living. That as we learn the principles of God, we learn the spiritual principles, that we live in that constant state of possibilities where the impossible become possible for those of us who believe and work this gift that we have of the presence and power of God within. In Unity, we teach principles. The primary principle is that principle of mind, that we can use the mind. We can use the mind to shape and to reshape our reality. And I want to encourage you, regardless to where you are on your journey, regardless to what your life might be today, maybe there are some of you, you're just so ecstatic about your life. Life is going great. You're happy. You're fulfilled. You feel and know your oneness and connection with God. You are at peace in mind and heart. You know that you're living on purpose. And we celebrate that. And it's my prayer, if that is your lot today, if that is your experience, that even you can still move deeper. You know, the scripture says, in my Father's house there are many mansions, meaning that there are many rooms in consciousness. There are many levels that we can grow on and grow to as long as we are open. The mere fact that we are still here means that there's still something for us to learn, something for us to experience. And maybe there are those of you in the congregation who are on the opposite end of the pole. Maybe your life is not as you desire to be. There are some areas of life and living that you would like to see changed, to up-level. And if that's you, friends, these principles will work for you. The principle of mind, that we can use our mind and make our own decisions as we commune with the God within. And as we commune with the God within, that spirit, that power, that voice will guide us into divine right actions, to divine right people. It will have us making the right decisions at the right time for the right results. We are reminded today that if we want to be something, do something, have something, experience something beyond what we have experienced, then we have to first be willing to make it up in our mind, to do it differently. Einstein gave this definition. It's on quantum insanity. He says quantum insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. Friends, that is insane. So if we want something different, if we want to experience something different, we have to be willing to do something differently. The power of a made-up mind is our ability to master, to shape, and transform our lives. You know, there are many freedoms that we have in this country. We have the freedom to speak up and to speak out on matters that concerns us whenever we desire. We have the freedom to worship however we like, and that's a freedom that we should really celebrate today, because there are, in many countries, people are not allowed to worship as they so choose or as they desire. But here in this country, we have the freedom to worship, and that's very prevalent. You can tell. You can just drive around this beautiful island of paradise and see the many worship centers and churches and temples and mosques where people are worshiping. And not just the buildings, but people are worshiping in their homes or worshiping on the streets. Just wherever we are, we can worship. We have the freedom to express our approval and disapproval for our elected officials and those who are in public service. We also have the freedom of choice. We have the freedom to choose. We have the freedom to decide, to make a decision. Life as we know it is full of decisions. We're often faced with decisions. What shall we do? What should we do? What should I do? You had to make decisions to get up this morning to get to this church. Some of you had to decide, all of us, we had to decide what to wear. I decided that I wanted to wear this shirt today. I had to make that decision. We're all making decisions, and it's important that as we're making life-changing and life-altering decisions, that we are mindful of principles that undergird the decision process. And it's my prayer that in this conversation there's something that is shared that will help you. Those of you who may be facing some tremendous decisions today. We make decisions every day, some major and some minor. And there will always be decisions and choices that we make in this life. In the Science of Living study guide, Reverend Frederick Eichencoder says, decision has power. In fact, I invite you to affirm this with me. Decision has power. My decision has power. Together. My decision has power. He says, the moment you make a decision, everything necessary for the fulfillment of your decision begins to happen. He goes on to say, the God in you has ways of bringing about that which you decide you want, but you must make the decision of exactly what it is you want. You know, most people know what we don't want. Everybody can tell you what they don't want. I don't want this. Well, what do you want? And maybe you've had that encounter with individuals. You ask them, what do you want? They can't tell you, but they know what they don't want. And friends, that attention on the don't want of what you don't want is a decision. But if you can get definite about what it is that your soul is desiring and know that it is God, many people think you're waiting on God to do something, but God is waiting on us. God is waiting on us to make a decision to make the world better. We don't have to depend on God. God has already done all that God needs to do. It's up to us now to use the power that we have, to choose, to decide that today, for me and my house, this is how it's going to work. For me and my house, I'm deciding that we're going to serve God. We're going to serve good. We're going to look for good, and we're going to create good. If you don't find good, you can decide to create the good that you're looking for. Be it first, as Mahatma Gandhi says. And the way that we do that, we make the decisions. We set the goals. And that is deciding, what is it? What is it that you're desiring to accomplish, to achieve in life? What is it that you're desiring to see manifested in your world? Paul says, one thing that I do is I forget that which is behind me, and I press forward towards the goal of the high calling in Christ Jesus. Suggesting that we must keep the goal. Give the mind a goal. And when we decide on a matter, that's what we're doing. We are giving the mind something to work with. The mind wants a decision. The mind wants you to decide. The mind needs a goal because the mind desires to stretch and then to begin to work on your behalf to make sure that the goal, the idea that you have in your mind becomes fulfilled, becomes manifested. What goal have you set for yourself? In fact, that's a question I invite you to ask. What goal have I set for myself? And as a congregation, I invite you to ask this. What goal or goals have we set for our church or for our community? And friends, in setting those goals, that's how we make the decision. We are deciding that this is what we want our experience to be. There is something about the mind that needs a goal, that needs us to get definite, to make a decision, to decide. As we said last week, Catherine Ponder, the great teacher in Unity, says that we must get definite with the infinite. And when we get definite with the infinite being God, the infinite gets definite with us. Job said it this way, you will decide on a matter, and what you decide will happen for you. You will decide on a matter, and it will be established unto you. So the question that I have for you today, I invite you to consider, to contemplate on this question. What would I like to accomplish over the next 12 months? In fact, there are two questions. It's a two-part question. What would I like to accomplish spiritually, socially, or financially over the next year? Really consider those questions. Take them home and wrestle with them. Give attention to it. Some of you might need to take a goal-setting day. Instead of calling off, taking a sick day, call in and say, hey, I'm taking a vision day. I'm working on my life, and I need a day to work on that. You don't have to be sick. Be well and take the day off. But set the goals. Decide for yourself what it will be, what your life, what you're desiring for your life. In his book, Your Best Life Now, Pastor Joel Osteen tells a story about a man who was visiting paradise. It was in Hawaii, not here in Paradise, St. Croix, although this is truly paradise, and many thanks to Elvis and Marsvin for assisting and helping us make this possible. Because you look around, and many thanks to Dr. Fasad for this extraordinary opportunity to be here in paradise as you're witnessing and gazing at the wonderful, beautiful background. So this young man was in paradise, and they were going through some of the most, some of the wealthiest communities there in paradise. Lush gardens and lawns, and they passed by this beautiful home, extraordinary home. And the man said to his wife and to his friends in that car, he says, I will never live in anything like that. I would never be able to live in anything like that. And there in the moment, it's just something on the inside of him says, and you never will. You will never live in anything like that. And he was startled by his own thoughts. And he began to talk to himself, what do you mean? And the response was, because you believe that it's not possible for you, then it will not be possible for you. And he had to make a decision in that moment to work on himself, to choose to, whether he choose to experience that or not, but at least to choose to feel worthy of it. And that's where we have to get to. Success, prosperity, wholeness, health, we can choose it. We can choose to experience that as we choose to feel worthy of that. We must set goals in order to reach them. Give your mind a goal. So as we talked about this, I was reminded of a story, and I called my mother actually this morning. You know, I talk about my mother often, and I hope that you're not tired of it. And if you are, you might as well deal with it, because she's been one of my greatest teachers. And I believe that we should pay homage to those who have made truly extraordinary marks on our lives. And my mother has been one of those. And I recall as a child, my mother had this experience. And I mean, she was a smoker. My mother would smoke. And most people would be surprised to hear this. And I was having this conversation with her this morning. I decided to call her. She started smoking at the age of 16, she said. And for 40 plus years, she smoked. And one day, she decided to put down the cigarette, and she never picked it up again. So I called her this morning. I was like, Mom, tell me about that. What inside of you compelled you to do that? And this is no criticism, no judgment of anybody who smokes. I'm just giving you this story as an example. And she says, boy, I just made up my mind. I'm like, what do you mean you made up your mind? She says, I made up my mind, and I decided that I'm not going to smoke anymore because I didn't like what it was doing to my body. I knew what it was doing, and your siblings often complained about the smoke in the house, and I knew what it was doing. But she says, I just made up my mind, and I had the faith that I wouldn't pick it up. She said she was told that if she could go 1 week without smoking, she would never smoke again. And friends, I'm telling you, this has been at least, she smoked for 40 years. This has been at least nearly 30 years, and she had not picked up a cigarette. And she says, well, even today, she says, Jack, the thought has come. She says, but I made up my mind. Every time the thought would come, I had to make up my mind that, no, I'm choosing health. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing this. And she gave me these words, and she says, God in you has given you the mind and has given you the faith. These are your tools, and all you got to do is use the tools that God has given you to create the life that you want. She says, regardless of what your situation, and she was preaching to me this morning. I got happy in the car, and I was sitting in the church parking lot. She was preaching. She says, whatever it is, addiction, no big deal. Any kind of habits or self-defeating habits, the moment you make up your mind and you choose that this is what you want, Ernest Holmes says all of nature began to conspire on your behalf then. the God in you gets to working, and everything in the universe begins to conspire to help you to bring into manifestation and into fruition that which you have decided on. The power of a made-up, my friends, when you work with the power of a made-up mind, you are working with the power of God in you. And that's all you have to do, is to decide to choose. And you don't have to get tripped up on wondering how it's going to happen. I asked my mother, well, what was it inside of you that told you that you could do this? She said, it was God in me that told me that I could. I believed it. And the faith to believe in it. I decided on it. I believed in it. I had faith in it. And I did it. And she has stood and she would tell anybody, if I did it, so can you. And friends, these were the same words of the Master Teacher Jesus. All of the many miracles and the wonderful demonstrations that we read about in biblical literature, all of the many wonderful things that he did, and he says, these, and even greater works, this and even greater works shall you do. And that's what we're called to do. Yes, he is our exceptional example, but he's demonstrated what we all can be and become. If we choose to make up the mind to believe in the God in us, as he referred to the God in him as Abba, Abba, and to commune with that Spirit, to commune with that presence, to seek it, to seek its guidance. And I'll tell you, I don't do anything today. I do absolutely nothing until I first go to God in prayer. There's a song that Reverend Constance Mohorn Taylor, it was a poem that she wrote. It says, I can hear the Spirit's voice as I listen. It helps me make the perfect choice as I listen. No more running to and fro. Just be still and take it slow. It will tell you what you need to know as you listen. Friends, this power inside of us is a tremendous gift that we have. You can choose right now, and this is a challenge that I offer you. If you don't like what's showing up in your life, maybe there's someone who you just don't like where you're living. You don't like your context, your living accommodations. You don't like your living situation. I want to challenge you right now to decide that you're going to do something different. You're going to have something different. You're going to experience something different. Begin to create it first in your mind. And we teach that there are two creations to anything. The first creation is in the mind of man, this wonderful means of communication that we call the cell phone. And I'm going to send a couple of congregants, one in particular, I will not call any names, Grandma, a cell phone, so that you can use it. This cell phone was first created in the mind of man. And then the second creation is what I'm holding right here. You can begin to recreate your life. Decide in your mind. If you don't like where you're living, decide that you're going to move into something different. You're going to move into someplace better, something that aligns with your consciousness and your soul, a space that is a safe haven for you, a respite. If you don't like where you're working, then decide right now, make up your mind that you're going to explore a new career path or a new opportunity. Don't worry about how it's going to happen. If you don't like your money, if your money's looking funny, decide that you're going to have some money. Decide that you're going to be prosperous. And all it takes is a decision. Friends, it doesn't cost a dime to make up your mind. That's something free. It does not cost, in fact, I invite you to affirm it with me. It doesn't cost a dime for me to make up my mind together. It doesn't cost a dime for me to make up my mind. The price that we pay for anything and everything in our life is spiritual currency. You got to pay that currency in mind and in heart. And we pay it with our faith and our focus. What we focus on, and then the faith that it can be part of our experience, is the spiritual currency that we pay for anything. I love what it says in James chapter 1, verses 6 and 8 through 8. It says, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because he or she who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not think they will receive anything from the Lord. They are double-minded individuals, unstable in all that they do. Friends, the Greek word for double-minded means two-souled or pulled apart in different directions. And maybe you know some double-minded people. I pray that there are no one in this congregation double-minded. Double-minded in the Greek means to have divided loyalties, divided priorities. And if we're honest about it, all of us have probably been double-minded, indecisive at some point in time in our life. It reminds me of the story of Dr. Seuss that you might know, the guy who couldn't make up his mind. Have y'all heard that story? You remember that story? The guy who couldn't make up his mind. It says, at the end, it says, for 36 hours and a half, that Zod made starts and made stops at the fork in the road. He could not make up his mind, tossing and turning on this side and that side. It is that state of indecision. And the indecision is usually rooted in negative experiences of the past. Indecision, we're afraid to move forward at times because of something in the past or because we're fearing the future. The two thieves on the cross, standing on each side of the master teacher, Jesus. But we can choose to use this power. So there are 4 steps very quickly. We started this last week, and someone asked me about the 4th step. I think we only got to 2 of those 4 steps or 3. And these steps might be a bit different today, so that's okay. 4 steps to making up the mind. First, you decide. Just decide. To decide means to make up one's mind as to what to do. Just choose to decide, to make a decision. And you pray about it, make the decision, just trust that it is the highest decision. And I always say this, God, if this is not it, it's either this or something better. This is what I'm deciding. But if you have something better in mind, I surrender to this. I'm making up my mind about this or something better. And you pray that prayer and you give God permission to bring in the better. Once you decide on it, write it down. From the book of Habakkuk, it says, write the vision and make it plain. And this is the purpose of doing those vision boards, those treasure boards, those mind maps. You write it down and begin to cut out images to reflect that vision. Write it and make it plain. And when you create a vision board or a mind map or a treasure map, put it somewhere prevalent in your home that you're going to walk by it and be reminded of it day in and day out, so that you're making this vision firm in your own mind. And when we write it, we are making it firm in the mind. Get the vision and then write it out. It's just writing out your plan, writing out your goals. Write it out. And you don't have to let anybody read it if you don't want to. But if you want to actually activate the law of agreement, get a couple of people that you trust, that you can share it with, that you know that can believe with you and will not attach any negativity to it. The second step, and using the power of the mind, is that you believe it. As my mother said, you got to have faith. You got to believe it. Believe that it's possible, first of all. Believe that it's possible. Then believe that it's possible for you. Belief is the mental acceptance of the thing. When we believe in it, we are mentally accepting it. God, I believe that it's possible. I mean, to think that I would be here in paradise. I believe that it was possible. I believe it. And to be with such a beautiful community as Unity of St. Croix. So we attach the beliefs to it. The third step is that we have to see it in the mind, and this is the process of visualization. You get in the theater of your mind and use the power of your imagination. And last week we said that imagination is the cookie cutter of the mind. And you see it. If it's a new car that you're desiring, and I'm just using this as an example, see yourself going to the dealership. See yourself walking on the showroom floor. Now listen, don't go to the used lot. Go to the showroom floor and get it off the showroom floor if that's what you want, and then get it paid for. See yourself in the car behind the wheel. Smell that new car scent. I love the smell of new. I love the smell of new. And see yourself moving in that car and driving it along these wonderful windy roads here in St. Croix. Feel that. Feel yourself driving around the potholes, okay? Moving and swerving, but going at a decent speed. Feel that. Turning on the car and hear that purr. Hear it. Just like that was the purr. Thank you very much. If it's a home, see yourself in there. Get in the theater of your mind. If it's health, see yourself well. If it's a relationship, and I don't know if I've shared this story with you or not. If those of you who are desiring a relationship, desiring your soulmate or your life partner, There was a lady I recalled, she would show up at church sitting on the front row every Sunday, and she would get in there. The church would be packed full, and she'd get on the front row and keep this empty seat beside her. And the ushers would come bringing people to sit beside her. She said, "Oh, no, someone's sitting here." And they asked her, "Well, who's sitting there?" She says, "My husband." And they all knew that she wasn't married. And Sunday after Sunday, she would keep that seat empty. And finally, an usher got fed up, and she says, "Well, lady, you're not married." She says, "But in my mind, I am. And I'm keeping this seat free because in my mind, he is sitting with me. He is my husband. I'm married." And friends, by the end of the year, her husband walked in there with her. She was truly married. She created it in the mind. She saw it in the mind. And then the fourth thing that we're called to do is we got to feel it. Once we drop it from here, the conscious level, we got to put the feminine energy with it. We got to get it in the subconscious phase of being. That's the feeling nature of the soul. It must reach the womb of the soul. The woman, the woman of the soul, the mother of the soul, got to feel this thing. And when you get the feeling of it, Reverend Ike says the feeling will get the blessing every time. The feeling is like the hook on the end of the fishing line. Is that what you call it? You put the hook on it? It is the hook that will catch the fish, whatever it is you're fishing for. The feeling will get the blessing. See it and feel it. The Science of Living principle says you are in command of the infinite God power within you. Decide what you want and get out of the way of the God power. As Ralph Waldo Emerson says, your greatest power is the power of choice. Decide. Believe it. See it. And then feel it. We used to sing this song at Williams Grove Missionary Baptist Church, especially people who are working on going through some challenging situation. I got a feeling everything's gonna be all right. Oh, I got a feeling everything's gonna be all right. Oh, I got a feeling everything's gonna be all right. Be all right. Be all right. It's gonna be all right. You begin to get that feeling for yourself. Get the feeling for your life, for your family. Get that feeling that everything's going to be all right. See it. Choose that it's going to be all right. For your community. For our nation and for our world. And friends, we'll see that some way, somehow, everything truly will get all right. I thank you so much for this opportunity. Know that I love you. I bless you. I appreciate you. And I behold the Christ in you. Uh-huh.